Ahoy, Nakama, and welcome aboard, or walk the plank. We're your co-captains, Adam and Ed, and this is the Void Sentry Podcast. Your weekly deep dive into One Piece lore, lost treasures, and the wildest fan theories from the Grand Line to the Void Sentry. From ancient secrets to Yonko chaos and fresh chapter breakdowns, if you're chasing Laugh Tale, you're in the right crew. Yarg! Hit subscribe and let's set sail. Hello, and welcome back to the Void Sentry Podcast, here today to bring you episode 39, chapter 1158 of One Piece, Rocks vs. Herald. So we finally get a wrap-up of the cover panel series, and we actually do see Yamato and the rest of the people in Wano. They are at the mysterious grave in the Ringo region, and in typical Oda fashion, we get a huge twist. It turns out this grave is for none other than Kozuki Moria. I never even thought that it was possible that Moria himself could be affiliated with the Kozukis in any way, or Wano, other than plundering their riches and stealing Ryuma's grave and the sword. So this leads into a whole bunch of implications into the story. Ed, do you want to tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, I don't think anybody, or not many people, really predicted that Moria would actually be a Kozuki, but it's really interesting. So let's do kind of a deep dive on Moria. And first, I want to talk about the way you spell his name. So in Japanese, when you spell his name out, it's actually just two characters. And if you flip the two characters instead of reading Gecko, it reads as Kozuki. So it seems to be that this was like an alias for Moria, or it still is an alias for Moria. So he didn't really, he's kind of hiding in plain sight with his name and his identity. So yeah, he's a Kozuki. So yeah, what do you think, Adam? Maybe he's like a family member of the Kozuki clan. So you think that he might be a brother or possibly a cousin or something like that?
I don't really like the idea of Odin sharing the spotlight with anybody else. I would hope that he's some kind of a cousin or a distant relative, but still carries the name. There also is the phenomena in Japanese culture where somebody of a lower family will take a higher family's name. I'm not too sure about the ritual behind that, but it is a possibility. Very interesting to think that Moria is really aligned with the Kazukis in this way, outside of being a scabbard or like a follower of Odin.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you brought up that he possibly married into the family, just because looking at him, he doesn't really look like Momo or like Odin, even like in his younger years. So I think that that's definitely a possibility. So another thing I want to bring up is because he's a Kozuki, he most likely actually has the ability to read poneglyphs. Remember, we know that both Odin and Momosuke could both read the poneglyphs. So it wouldn't be a far stretch to think that Gecko Moria or Kozuki Moria would be able to also read the poneglyphs. So possibly, he set sail after Roger's execution, or maybe before, to find the different poneglyphs. And he already had access to a road poneglyph in Wano, so he kind of had a head start against everybody else. And I don't know, what do you think? Maybe he was trying to, gain power from what he could find at Laugh Tale to, help fight against Kaido, because Kaido is still a big threat in Wano. Like Odin, only passed away, 24 years, 20, I forget exactly how many years ago, but he just passed away before Roger's execution. So yeah, what do you think? Why do you think that he might have, set sail? Do you think that this is a possibility?
I don't know. I find it really hard to think of what the angle could possibly be, why he would want to go out and read and catalog the poneglyphs. I think possibly he wanted to go out and create more poneglyphs, but it seems like Moria was defeated in more ways than one. If you will. Because it seems like after whatever happened with him, he just wanted to just chill out in the Florian Triangle and just mess with people, instead of like doing anything like world shattering, like going ahead and finding the poneglyphs or becoming the Pirate King. That's like Moria's whole shtick, right? Is like he lost all motivation and wanted his crew just to fulfill his dreams for him, instead of like fulfilling his dreams himself and leading by example from the front, if you will.
Yeah, and we'll definitely touch more on that, moving forward. But let me just bring up first that we actually know that he fought and lost to Kaido 23 years ago. So that means that he was very strong. Like he probably, or we've seen him have hockey, at least in the anime, possibly conquers hockey. So he's very strong. He was able to clash against Kaido as an equal. Again, we saw some stills in the anime. Not, I don't believe it was in the manga. So I think that we can. It's safe to assume that they clashed either way. So yeah, he was really strong, and we also know around the time of his battle with Kaido that he desecrated Ryuma's grave to steal his corpse so that he could use him, and be more powerful. So, what do you think of possibly the people of Wano Kuni willingly letting Moria desecrate Ryuma's grave just because they were that desperate in order to, you know, be not be under Kaido's thumb anymore?
I don't think so, because even after they found out that Shisui, Ryuma's sword, had returned to Wano, right? They were like really getting on Zoro's case about it. They were like chasing him around. If they willingly had some kind of inkling about what happened to the sword or Ryuma's corpse, like, I think they would have at least sent a party out to go and retrieve it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, true. Well, either willingly or not, I still believe that the main reason that he did this was to use Ryuma's corpse with his Shadow Fruit against Kaido. So really interesting to note that Kaido and the Beast Pirates were able to overcome Ryuma as well. So that's kind of cool. What else? So after his fight against Kaido, I think that maybe the people of Wano just assumed that he died or he passed away because, I mean, obviously they created a grave or a memorial for him. So maybe they just weren't able to find his corpse at the battlefield site. And once everything was all said and done, and they're like, hey, you know what? We'll, you know, erect a grave for him because he is an honorable warrior who is trying to protect our country. And instead, actually, this was your theory. So who might have found him instead of the Wano Kuni?
So we know that in the previous cover pages, they stated that this hero was vaporized, right? They never found the corpse. So we know Moria is like really good friends with Hogback. I don't know if Hogback was somebody who was able to find Moria and kind of stitch him back together. Tudunts. But needless to say, Moria is alive. They did create a grave for him on Wano after his fight with Kaido. He was vaporized. We also noticed that in terms of Moria's character, he had a little bit less stitching on him back in the day when he was a child. He had like two primary stitches like on his forehead, and now it almost seems like he was bisected like completely in half.
Yeah, not only that, like he looked like normal human proportions during the battle with Kaido, but after most likely Hogback took care of him and helped resurrect him, his neck got elongated and there's like just a line of stitches in his neck now, and his shape is kind of different. So yeah, I think that I'm in the belief that it was Hogback. He happened to be at that battle site. Maybe he was part of the crew, part of Gecko crew. Maybe not. I'm not sure. But he was probably the one who found him and helped nurse him back to life. And after the battle with Kaido, I think one or both of these things happened, which is he became very sad and depressed with losing his crewmates. So he just kind of, like you were saying earlier, just kind of living in the Florian Triangle, kind of causing havoc, but having like very little motivation and, very much still commiserating about losing his crewmates. But also maybe like he might have had like a slight personality change just from that resurrection process. And, maybe even like a partial amnesia, like if you lose blood flow to your brain, it can cause permanent brain damage. So that could, possibly cause a change in his personality, a change in his demeanor, make him, just more sad as well. So either one or both of those things probably happened in my mind.
What I think is really, I'm sorry to cut you off, but what I think is really interesting is that Oda spent like his whole life trying to get off of Wano, and seemingly Moria did it just because.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he did it specifically because Odin wasn't there anymore. Odin passed, so he there was probably nobody else around that that could stand in his way. Because again, Moria was Kaido level strength, or I mean, just under Kaido level strength. The retainers, all the scabbards were zapped into the future, except for the ninja woman. I forgot her name, but the short ninja woman, Shinobu, is that her name?
Yeah, Shinobu, good one.
Yeah, but she was still a child at the time, so or much younger at the time, so Moria was probably more powerful. He might have very well been the most powerful Wano Kuni samurai at the time, with all the scabbards kind of zapped into the future, or most of them, right? Not all of them zapped.
Yeah, most of them were. But
Yeah,
where was he when Odin was boiling though? If you're like such a strong fighter, like shouldn't you have been there?
yeah, maybe he was already off of Wano Kuni at this point. Maybe, or oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, so I don't know. Like it's possible he was off of Wano Kuni at this point, and he got not Oda, Odin's blessing, or he did it right after Odin was boiled. But yeah, yeah, where was he? I don't know. Like your guess is as good as mine. Yeah, so the final thing I wanted to bring up is that Moria's design, even as a child, he has these little horns, and he's actually like much bigger than the average size human. Even in his like I guess glory days when he fought Kaido, like we see images of him next to his crewmates and he kind of towers over them. So he was a very large person. Like he was the same height as Kaido, and we already know that Kaido is also much bigger and taller than an average human. So he might have some sort of special ancestry, which kind of also leads me to think that maybe he possibly married into the Kozuki family just because, Odin was a normal human size and so is Momosuke and Toki and all them. So, yeah, do you think that maybe potentially he ate the shadow fruit and it gave him horns and it made him bigger? Or do you think that he has some sort of special lineage? What do you think, Adam?
I think it's probably got something to do with his blood. I think Wano is still very mysterious, and I think it wouldn't be far off to think maybe he's got like part ancient giant DNA in him, or maybe he's part of like this ogre race that we've heard of, or maybe he's even a yokai. Like we don't know anything about Moria really in terms of like his past other than he fought Kaido and lost and is seemingly like a Kozuki. So it's very interesting to see exactly where the horn motif came from. I don't think it came from the fruit directly because I don't think we've seen any other like physical changes like that manifest from a fruit except for when a zone user goes like hybrid form, right? We don't see really physical manifestations outside of maybe like your body turning into like a certain form of element other than zone users going in hybrid form and turning into half animals.
That's very true. Another interesting thing to note about his horns are they're not like black tipped. So they're just kind of like the same color as his skin. Whereas, some giants like Loki or sorry, some other people with horns like Loki or Harold, I guess they happen to be giants, but they have those black tips. And I think that even, what's her name?
Yamato has
Oh,
black tipped horns as well.
Yamato does, yeah. Did Kaido have black tip?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also, what's her name again? The person that Emu is taking control of? Gunko. Gunko, I believe, also has black horns when they manifest.
Oh yeah, when she turned into like her imp
Her,
form.
yeah, her like imp or demon form. So yeah, we do kind of. So he's kind of like a little bit different, where he doesn't have the black horns, but who knows? Like maybe like if you are a child of someone with black horns, you might not inherit the horns to be black. I don't know.
I just think it's interesting that the guy who's cosplaying a demon doesn't have the demon horns, but these people who are actual demons have.
Who's the guy cosplaying as demons?
Oh, I'm just saying, like Moria, right? He's the spooky one. He's got the spooky
Oh, I see.
arc.
Yeah. He definitely does have those like shadow bats that he uses too, so he does have that spooky vibe for sure.
Yeah, I really love the whole Halloween theme of Moria's and arc and the Thriller Bark arc. One of the other things I wanted to touch on too is what's the deal with ores, right? Like we know ancient giants have like a prominent history in Wano, especially with the yokai and Onigashima and that big skull. Do you think Ors was there on the island as well during this battle against Kaido? if you think about it too, I find it very hard to believe that if the body of Ors was there and if Moria fought with Ors's body during this battle, he would be able to escape with the body. It's just really hard logistically to try to retreat while you're moving something that's the size of a continent, right?
Yeah, I think that Ors probably was there, and it's very or possibly was there, and it's very possible that he was part of this fight and he was even maybe slain there, just because we know that they eventually, Moria eventually ends up with his corpse and he's able to resurrect it with Luffy's shadow. So we do know that he does get that. So maybe it happened during this battle. Who knows? I'm not exactly sure. And I don't even necessarily know if he was part of the Gecko Pirates. It's possible he was part of the Beast Pirates.
I think it was originally stated that Ors was so dim that he actually froze to death. Originally,
Oh.
I don't know if he was defeated again and then like repaired by Hogback, because remember he has all those patches all over his body. So maybe he could have like died here again and was defeated with Moria. But to the point, like logistically, I don't understand how it would make sense to try to retreat with the corpse of Ors, right?
That makes sense, yeah. Especially when Hogback is trying to resurrect Moria. That's probably his number one priority at the end of the battle.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So I find it hard to believe. Again, like Moria, where were you when Odin was boiled? Like you should have been there. But I guess moving forward, if you want to get into the chapter a little bit, we spent all this time on the cover series. We open up and we actually get to see a flashback of the Roger Pirates. We get to see the Oro Jackson. Roger and the rest of the crew is learning that Shaki opened up her rip off bar on Hachinosu. The crew's telling him all about it. Roger is looking like he's pouting, longingly looking out to the sea. And the crew goes on to exclaim that they were worried they'd never be able to see Shaki again. They really want to go see her immediately. And they mention that she's on Hachinosu and that's totally Rox's territory. And then we see Scopper, he kind of pulls Rayleigh aside and he says, "Hey, do you think the captain's been a little weird lately? Ever since you two had that secret meeting in his captain's quarters, things have been a little weird between you two. What's up?" So apparently Rayleigh approached Roger and wanted to talk to him one-on-one about something. And he mentioned that during the fight with the Kuja pirates, Roger seemed to think that Shaki wasn't acting like herself lately. She seemed to have contracted some sort of mysterious illness. And Roger starts to worry if maybe she stepped down for her health. And then Rayleigh is like, "Hey, Captain, I gotta show you something. Actually, Shaki slipped me something during this last battle." And we see that Shaki slipped Rayleigh a love letter, and it says something along the lines of, "Come and get me." Ever the forward move from a woman. And Rayleigh just said he likes her, but just doesn't want to be tied down. He's definitely got the cool aloof guy shtick down. And then Roger says, "Well, you don't want to be tied down. I want to be tied down, and I'm going to go get what I want." So Roger gets like this second burst of energy and he seems to be reinvigorated. And then he says something along the lines of, "Pirates live to plunder and don't stop until the prize is claimed." And the crew starts teasing Roger and they know that Roger only wants to go to Hachinosu so that he can get his girl.
Yeah, so Rogers is definitely bitter that Silver's got that love letter from Shaki. And I was thinking that it's very possible that this love note was actually written on a Vivre card. And like they already know that Shaki is on Hachinosu, that's why they're already going there anyway. But it's possible that she leaves Hachinosu and she would want the person that she loves to come find her, like even if she's not there anymore. So yeah, I think that it's possible it might be a Vivre card. What do you think?
This is not dating advice, but I heard some women just like to be pursued. And she seems to be the type, as we'll see a little bit later in Roger meeting with Gloriosa. Sometimes it's just all about the game, right? Some are just in it for the chase. But I think it would make sense if it was a Vivre card, and Ed totally picked up on this because I didn't even think about it. But all I'm going to say is if I was the person crafting this Vivre card, would definitely keep a copy to sell on the black market because, Kuja Pirates Vivre cards go for a lot of money if the pictures are going for thousands on the
Yeah, that's true.
on the One
I wasn't
Piece.
even thinking. Yeah. Yeah, no, she definitely wouldn't want that out there to anybody. But also, like, they're part of one of the greatest pirate crews of all of the world. So I think that she feels pretty safe, and she knows that, or I think she's pretty sure that he loves him back. And also, her falling ill, clearly that's love sickness that the Kuja Empresses get. So we know that that's probably the main reason why she stepped down. We already talked about this a bunch on the last episode. So yeah, next in the story, we cut to Marie-Joie 40 years ago, and it looks like St. Garling is talking to the different of the Gorosei members. So one of them is calling him impatient, and I guess the previous Great Hunt competition just ended, and Garling is basically saying that even though he's impatient, he only just briefly stopped at this one island, and it's currently not affiliated with the world government, but it has a really unique and interesting culture. And he offered the membership to the world government like straight up, which shows how like powerful and influential Garling already is. I mean, he's a holy knight at this point already. But yeah, apparently he made this completely outrageous and preposterous discovery, and it was just like a completely unexpected find. And he says that the Great One, probably Emu, will be pleased about this find. And he suggests that they hold the next Great Hunt at God Valley. So what do you think, Adam, would please Emu enough that that Garling is like insistent on having God Valley be set for the next Great Hunt?
I don't know, but we definitely get to see Garling seems to be very ambitious. Do you think this is possibly something he set up on the island in order to gain more clout? Because it says here in his text box, it says future elder, right? So perhaps this is a nod to Garling's ambitions to climb up the corporate ladder, if you will. And maybe this is just one in many events that he went ahead to orchestrate in order to gain more power. But as a holy knight, you can only get so far, right? You could be a Gorosei, you could be like an elder planet, but you'll never get that emu status, right? So I find it hard to see what his angle is there. But with that being said, we know that the God's Knight serves God Valley. It's got God in the name. We're connecting it all together here today on the Void Sentry Podcast. I'm only kidding. But this God Valley name couldn't only reference like the one God in One Piece, right? It could be the sun god, the forest god, the sea god. We see in different parts in One Piece, especially in Skypiea, there are references to different gods, as we see with like Nika, the sun god, for instance. We also learn of the forest god, I think, is mentioned on Zou. And we also know of a sea god as well. The sea god gets angry when you eat devil fruits. Perhaps this could also be a nod to an ancient weapon. Maybe this is the ancient weapon that they found that would go on to destroy Lelucia, supposedly. So, Ed, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that it definitely might be the ancient weapon, and that weapon that we see destroy Lucia. Maybe that was used at God Valley. That is a theory that's been out there for some time. Like it could be. There's so many different ways to, I guess, destroy an island in One Piece. So it could be that, and then also, yeah, there's just like this huge like. Well, you know what? I'll let you go. What else do you think, Adam?
So, I think that there was a point to mention that this island and these people had a unique culture in some way. So maybe this island has some form of religious significance. If not to the people, then maybe the world government themselves. We see with the world government that they practice like a form of demon magic, right? With the pentagrams and these arcane circles. Perhaps there could be like an ancient ritual site, or this could be a site that is really important to the religion that they follow, at least with this demonology, if it is a religion in itself. But demonology, as we know in our world, is like intertwined with religion and esotericism and mysticism, at least in our world. So I was thinking maybe that we know that Emu carries around like that manuscript that he's been summoning weapons, or she has been summoning weapons from. And perhaps this was a trinket or an artifact that was picked up from God Valley itself. Perhaps this was like an artifact that they venerated and Emu was the only one who really understood its true significance and was able to unlock its true potential. So this is also the book that we know that Gunko was carrying when Emu possessed her. Ed, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that like it's very possible that it might be cultists or some like type of arcane, type of group of people. Although like in the like later in the chapter we actually see some people from the island, some native inhabitants, and they kind of look like normal people. They don't really look like cultists. So the other thing I was thinking was that maybe they are worshippers of the sun god of Nika. And I bring that up because, one of the great prizes at God Valley when the God Valley incident happens is a devil fruit. So what if maybe it's the Nika fruit? Because like this island is the island of Nika or something like that. What do you think about that?
So we do know that there were a lot of really powerful devil fruits on the island. We don't know the status of the Hito Hito model Nika before God Valley, so it is possible that this could have been something that was founded found at the island and was offered up as a prize. However, if I'm the world government and I'm going to have a tournament, even if it's for like my rival's power, I'm not going to give it to one of my own men. I'm going to keep that thing under lock and key, hide it underneath my castle and my kingdom right next to the straw hat of my most hated enemy, right? So
Yeah, true.
I don't think if it was the Nika fruit that I would want that going anywhere other than like in the bowels of my dungeons. And I don't care how friendly we are, I would not give it to anybody I liked because that's like it's like the whole spy shtick of like you know, do you expect me to live? No, I expect you to die, right? So let me go ahead and give you everything you possibly need to escape the current situation, and I'm just going to turn around and just walk away and act like nothing's going to happen, right? So I think you're just asking for trouble if you give anybody the Nika fruit, if you know where it is and you don't like lock it up under lock and key. So it could be that this is where the fruit was at that point in time. I don't think they offered it up as a prize though.
Or maybe Garling wanted to win it so that he could offer it to Emu as like a grand gesture, being like, even though I won this as a prize, I'm giving it to you to show you my loyalty because I know that you're anti Nika. So here you go, great Emu.
I mean, this might be hard to believe, but I think Emu is so powerful he could probably like low diff Figureland. I'm just
Oh
saying,
yeah,
like, Figureland, you've been such a good boy. Thanks for giving me the fruit. I wouldn't even give him the opportunity in the first place, right? Like,
that's fair. Yeah.
if you know this thing is here, it's immediately mine. Like, you're supposed to be my underling, and if you don't give it to me, like, you're dead either way. So that's just how I feel. However, we do get to see a shot of the island a little bit later. We do get a nice angle of the island. And with the shape of the island, I never put two and two together before, but it almost looks like a tuning fork, right? A tuning fork could also be used for things like resonance, like sound resonance. And I just think it would be very interesting if Emu could like use the island, the geography in the island of some way to become like even more powerful or to like bolster his power, right? So I thought maybe the island itself could be like some kind of arcane force multiplier for Emu in some way.
Yeah, I think that it's also possible that the island itself, back before the water level rose, this would have been like a great mountain because already God Valley is like a great sized mountain in general as it is, like current, like at least in this flashback. So like, yeah, like like what type of people would live in a mountainous area? Like maybe it's those people that came from the moon that might have like settled on someplace closer to space and they might have had like an ancient weapon or something like that. So I'm just kind of trying to think of what type of people would want to live there. Maybe they experimented on the mountain with the ancient weapons to see what kind of destruction it could cause. Although, like, I still think that it's probably a great slash of a blade is still my number one theory on it. But yeah, I'm just kind of like, just thinking out loud of different reasons why people would settle there and who they might be.
Well, the people seem relatively well adjusted. They seem to be just normal people. They're not walking around in like headdresses or any kind of like specific religious garb. So they seem just to be normal people. And to your point, with the shape of God Valley, it does look like some ancient battle happened there. Maybe this ancient battle was to protect the thing that Garling found.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Ooh, and suddenly it gets deeper. But Ed, do you want to continue on with the
And
chapter?
and wait, who would deny joining the world government? It would probably be, some sort of resistance, or maybe they were on the opposite side during the Void Century. So, yeah, it's just fun to think about. All right, so back to the chapter. Now we, switch scenes over to Shaki's ripoff bar on Hachinosu, and there's just a long, long line, months wait line of people outside the door waiting to get in. And then there's like some people saying that they can't afford the drinks there; they're so overpriced. And Shaki's like, "Oh well, I'll offer like you can stay and drink, but you just have to work here for free for 2 years, and yeah, you can have your drink." So I guess that's how Shaki's getting her free labor. And yeah, we just see a bunch of patrons just swooning over Shaki. She's just acting normal and a little flirty, I'm sure. And one of the pirates came from North Blue, and I heard about some good whiskey there, and that Shaki makes a great stew. And she's like, "Oh, I'd never cook for you." And the pirates like they don't care, like they're just like whatever you say. And one of the chefs is like, "Oh, we're actually out of whiskey," so she's like, "Just give them the cheap rum instead." So she's like, "Oh yeah, we only serve the top quality whiskey," and serves them rum, and they cheer even for the poor service. And yeah, we've seen a lot of bars in the world of One Piece, like even in the first chapter. So what's kind of like the prominence of bars in the story of One Piece?
Well, if you think about it, if a pirate's going to land in port, right, they're going to be a bar. They're obviously going to want to get drunk. So we have a lot of patronage of bars and bar maidens, if you will. So we actually open up the story Romance Dawn in Makino's bar, right? Makino being the proprietor of the bar, and we see Luffy sitting there declaring himself to being a strong pirate, and he stabs himself underneath his eye to give himself his trademark scar, while he declares himself to be the manliest of men and the piratiest of pirates. We see him later declare himself as wanting to be the Pirate King. Ed, do you have any good thoughts of Makino's bar?
No, actually, I wanted to talk about the first time Luffy met Blackbeard was also at a bar, which was like a very significant scene, and that whole scene with Blackbeard was like a really great introduction because we meet him and we're like, oh, this guy's pretty cool. Like he's a very interesting character, and he ends up being like the main or one of the main antagonists.
Yeah, actually, Luffy and Blackbeard did meet in that bar on Jaya. We see before and after Luffy and Zoro tested their mettle against Bellamy's pirate crew. And we actually see going on in the chapter a little bit later that Rox and Roger clashed exactly like Blackbeard and Luffy did. And,
Oh yeah.
so they have like the whole clash. And if you think about it too, we'll see later on in the chapter that it's a rule. There's no fighting in the bar. You can fight wherever else you want on the sea. Just don't fight in the bar. And we see even before we knew it, even Shanks and Makino's bar refused to fight the Haguma pirates. And, he actually cleaned up and tried to keep the peace in the bar. And we see that Luffy and Blackbeard themselves did not fight in that bar on Jaya. So it's very interesting how these things rhyme. And
Yeah, maybe it's like a unwritten pirate code to not be able to fight in the bar.
I think it is. I mean, because where else would you tell stories about your adventures, right? You all want to
Right,
get drunk,
right.
have a party, and, ain't nobody got time for fighting in the bar. That's weak level pirate stuff. That's not what the strong does.
Right, exactly.
So
All right, back to oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say I thought it was interesting too that so the story opens in Makino's bar, and then we see like a little bit later in Saboti Archipelago, Luffy doesn't realize what he's doing or who he's saying it in front of, but he sits there and he declares himself to be Pirate King in front of Shaki and Silver's Rayleigh, right? And they're like, "Oh, Roger would have said the exact same thing. So it just goes to harken back exactly how important these moments are in the series. And as we actually find out more about the series, we really understand how important these scenes actually are. And Oda Oda's such a good storyteller that he keeps showing us these things. So he keeps these frequent themes in the story, and we don't pick on up on them until later because they kind of rhyme. Even in the story now, we see that Loki seems to be living with Ida and Hasrudin at their bar, right? While he's sitting around dreaming he could be a pirate and wishing for freedom. So it's very interesting that we have all these strong characters with all these lofty dreams sitting around hearing stories and dreaming in their local bar near the port.
Yeah, the bars are definitely very important in One Piece. So anyway, we'll go back to the chapter, and we see Rox come into the to Shaki's bar, and she greets Rox, and she says, "Hey, wait a minute, that smile you're making isn't for me anymore." And Big Mom just kind of teases both of them, and Rox acts a little embarrassed. And Whitebeard mentions that, hey, it must be a woman that he's smiling about. And Big Mom is like, oh, he's grinning like he's expecting a kid, and it's one of those like, oh, it takes one to know one type of thing, because obviously she's already had a few children at this point. So yeah, who might the child, this mysterious child, future child of Rox be? Could it be Blackbeard or maybe even Buggy? What do you think, Adam?
So, I mean, if we're playing devil's advocate, right, we know based on some of the information that you told me that Buggy is actually older than Blackbeard. And based on some of our previous research on God Valley, we know that Blackbeard was conceived around the God Valley incident. So if this is before God Valley, I would say that this is probably Buggy.
Yeah, Buggy is like a year older than Blackbeard when I looked into this. So I think that it's very, very possible that this is actually Buggy. And also, that would Buggy and Shanks are about the same age as well, so it kind of lines up because we do later see that Shanks was born around this time as well. So it kind of really lines up with all of that. And yeah, so I'll take it back to you, Adam.
Thank you. So moving on with the chapter, we see Roger bursting into the bar. He's declaring himself that he's come for Shaki, and we see Shaki turns to greet Roger, and immediately Rox gets all up in his face, and he's like, Roger, what are you doing on my island again? How many times do I have to tell you this is my turf? And then Shaki's like, boys, 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 you know there's no fighting in the bar. That's the only rule. So we see them facing off, and then Rox is like, hey, the line was out the door. How the heck did you get in here so quick? And we actually see the camera kind of pans out a little bit, and we see that the Roger Pirates went ahead and defeated everybody in line, and Roger was like, I hardly even realized there was a line outside of this bar. And it's hilarious. We see Whitebeard in typical Whitebeard fashion. Whitebeard's like, I gotta get out of here. These guys are just way too noisy for me. And then, Shaki's like, oh, closing out New Gate. And he's like, yeah, put it on Rox's tab. And then it's really good. So Shaki actually confronts Roger and was like, oh, Roger, it's so great to see you. Where's Rayleigh? And Roger's all smitten and he's like, oh, I told Rayleigh to come with us, but he's just resting on the ship. He said he wasn't feeling too good right now. And we see that Rayleigh typically is just playing the aloof, cool guy, just playing it cool in the face of true love.
Yeah, and he's like singing "Being Sake" alone on the ship. Well, I guess he's got that giant egg too, so he's singing it with the giant egg. So yeah, next we actually see a scene of Gloriosa, trying to hug tackle Rox, or sorry, not Rox, Roger. And she's like, "Would you like to take me away on your ship?" So is this her actually formally asking to join the Rox Pirates?
Or the Roger Pirates.
Or sorry, I keep on saying it, the Roger Pirates. Do you think that this is her trying to join the Roger Pirates?
I think so. It's almost like the reverse shtick of Luffy asking everybody to join his crew. It's kind of like Gloriosa is always asking other people if she can join their crew.
Yeah. And, you know, I was thinking about it and talking with Adam, and it's like, well, why would she be on the Rocks Pirates when she wants to be on the Roger Pirates? And it makes complete sense. Like, well, if she's not with Roger, then the next best thing would probably be Rocks because they're going to be clashing a lot and fighting each other a lot because they're kind of rivals. So it's probably the most she'll be able to see him otherwise is to join the Rocks Pirates. So that's probably the reason why she joined the crew. So Roger responds to Gloriosa saying he's just not really into women that like throw themselves at him and make it too easy. And Gloriosa's like sad and upset, saying like, I bet it'd be different if Shaki threw herself at you. And it makes no sense. And she's like really bitter. And I feel bad for Gloriosa. And Shaki, she hears this and she's like, yeah, I'm not really interested. I passed on you, Roger. Sorry. And Roger just looks really like, you know, like upset at the whole situation and like he's like sulking and he's like, oh, hey, where's Whitebeard? I wanna have drinks with my friend. And Whitebeard already left, as we already know. So Roger's wishing that Rayleigh came to the bar and oh, I guess I skipped this part, or I said this part too earlier, but yeah, we see him on the Oro Jackson singing Bing Sake, and they got that giant egg still on board, so he's singing it to the egg, and then we see Shanks or Shaki fainting, and everyone in the bar, of course, freak out and they try to help her out. And Gloriosa is just yelling and telling them to get away because obviously Gloriosa knows that this is due to love sickness. And she's probably one of the only few people who know how to help Shaki at this point. So, what do you think initiates the love sickness for the Kuja Empresses?
I don't know. I think just knowing that she's in the presence of Rayleigh, right? It's very interesting that she faints after we see the little panel of Rayleigh singing to himself. So maybe just being in the presence or hearing like the voice of your love is enough to like make your heart flutter to the point where it's like incontrollable and you go all flush and you faint, right? Like, have you ever been around somebody you like, Ed, and your heart just like won't calm down and it just won't stop like beating uncontrollably, and you know how you get nervous and your hands get clammy? I think it's like that with the Kuja Empresses. Just knowing that the person you're really enamored with is there is enough just to send you into like a complete tizzy, even if you
Oh
don't
yeah,
make contact with them.
I definitely have been there. I know. I just turn into like a dumb person. Like I can't think anymore. I'm just like, you know.
Yeah, it's really good. There's nothing quite like love. So the narrator states that Shaki's rules ensured, like we stated before, that fighting in her bar was forbidden. So whenever pirates would cross paths in her bar, no fighting allowed. There is something I really want to touch on though before we move forward. I do find it very interesting that we know that Shaki has been a proprietor of this bar and it's become very important on Hachinosu. However, we also get the juxtaposition of the panel with Rayleigh singing about Bing Sake, right? Delivering sake, delivering happiness and stories to this bar where everybody basically has a big party and just enjoys themselves and tells stories, right? So I think we can read into this a little bit deeper, that I think this bar concept is something that rhymes throughout the story, throughout the time of the ancient kingdom, even enough that it harkens back to Bing Sake, or something that all pirates share in common, right? But moving forward, we see that in the bar, things were calm and no fighting was allowed. But on the sea, it was a different story. That's where the real fighting happens. That's where the real warfare takes place. And suddenly we get a jump cut to the underworld in Elbath. And we see little Loki holding on to a tree with his eyes bandaged, trying to view something that's happening. Immediately, we see the tree snap and he goes flying. The animals start running away, and we see Hajrudin is sitting there solemn, also witnessing the same event. And he looks up in awe as we see Harold and Rocks clashing. Hockey conquerors, hockey sparks flying everywhere. We see Rocks fly back. We see Harold fly back as they prepare for their next attack. And Rocks is kind of angry at this point, and he says, Harold, you're my friend. How can you let the government get inside your head? And Harold's like, oh, believe me, it wasn't an easy choice to make. I wavered on this. And we see them as they're clashing. Rock says, Harold, if this is so important to you, would you kill your own friend to make this happen? And he said, you're just falling in line. They're using you and you don't even realize it. So we see Rox is like all cut up about it. And as we noted before, true warriors can speak with their fists, right? They don't even have to exchange words, just blows. And Rock says, Harold, don't you see you're blind? This is their answer. They only see you guys as a military force. You're just a piece on a chessboard. They're going to turn you into slaves and call you soldiers. Like, you're warriors. Don't you have any pride? Don't you have any free will of your own? And basically Harold retorts back to Rox and he's like, you don't understand any of this. You're not a king. You don't know what the giants have gone through. And he's like, we're warriors. You know, we spread violence throughout the land and some people haven't forgiven us for that. And he goes, this is now a weight that the giants have to carry around and it really hinders us from our diplomacy. And we see a flashback and Harold's bringing food to an island, and we see a bunch of old people that are like, Harold, you might be nice, but we got stomped by giants in the past. And we see Harold, you know, it's just really sad. Like, he's just rolling the boulder up the hill. No matter how hard he tries, people just don't see the giants as just being progressive and moving forward from their past. So, and Harold says, hey, listen, no matter how foolish the celestial dragons might be, they're the only ones that have the power to recognize Elbaf as, you know, being a member nation, as being reformed. And Rock says, stop it. He calls Harold a coward as he strikes him because Rox knows the true intentions of the world government, and Harold doesn't really understand how evil these people really are. And Rock says, okay, we're no longer friends. I'm never inviting you to my crew again. And Harold says, I'm the king. I couldn't possibly risk my whole kingdom following a guy like you into battle.
Yeah, so friendship over, and Harold basically responds saying that, yeah, he's a king. You know, he has to think of his people, and he can't really follow a villain into a losing battle. So yeah, they there was no real conclusion on the battle in terms of who won the fight, but yeah, it looks like they kind of tied, and their friendship ended at this point. Now, honestly, in this situation, I'm kind of in agreement with Rox here. The world government, there's no way that they would not just use the giants of Elbaf as just, you know, like pacifista, like how they use pacifista. They want to use them as mindless enforcers that can't talk back to them. And, you know, if they do anything against the world government that they don't like or try to think for themselves, they're going to probably, you know, do something bad to Elbaf. So yeah, it really sucks to see this because Rox just makes a lot of great points. And I think that this whole like betrayal of Rox might be like that point where Harold's dream might have been kind of lost and he kind of succumbed to being unable to fulfill his dream because he wanted to be a pacifist. He wanted to, you know, unite his nation, his country with the rest of the world and, you know, be a beacon of peace. And instead he's fighting his best friend, or at least one of his best friends. So this might have been the moment that broke him as a person, that made him completely stray away from his dream. Yeah, what do you think about that?
So, yes, so we know, just reading in a little bit further, the narrator says that they would meet no longer until that fateful incident. So I'm assuming that Harold was on God Valley and had to fight Rox once again. They did meet one more time before Harold died. So there was something that really happened, and it said that they could not see eye to eye until the day of the fateful incident. So maybe there was a point in time where Harold actually does understand how evil the world government is and how they're going to use him. But by that time, it was already too late, and it led to the demise of both Harold and Rox.
Yeah, and it sucks because I think that the type of change that Rox is looking for might actually be in alignment of what Harold is looking for as well. Like they might actually end up having the same like end goal. And it's, like we already know that the world government is the bad guy of the story and they're like really oppressive. And yeah, basically, I think that maybe later on, Harold might have realized that, hey, Rox was right all along and I probably should have joined him. But yeah, it sucks for them. Like it sucks that they have such bad history with people, even if they're trying to make up for it. Like even within Harold's lifetime, he was a pirate and ransacking, islands and countries and nations like that. Like he had a change of heart himself. So these old people that, aren't like forgiving them so quickly, it might have been Harold personally that attacked their village, like that, like it's not that far in the past that this happens. Like humans age quicker, so they might be old now, but 40 years ago they were, in their prime. So anyway, I'll give it back to you.
So we know that the friendship between Harold and Rox would come to an end. Like we stated before, they would not meet again for a long time, not until the day of a fateful incident, which we can only assume to be God Valley. We see Loki checking the paper. He's looking the paper for news about Rox. And, Ida playfully calls out to him and says, Rox isn't coming, Loki. And he's like, oh, shut up. Ida asks him if he wants some juice. And he's like, yeah. So we can only assume that Loki, even though, we have been led to think that he's grown up with all this torment and all this pain in his life, Ida and Hadrudin have really taken him in and kind of treated him as their own, even if he refuses to admit that he could be loved. He has been shown love. So I think it's really good for Loki's character, and I'm softening him on quite a bit. So, jump cut. We finally learn that God Valley itself is located in the West Blue, and we learn that this is 39 years ago. We see God Valley, again, looking like a tuning fork with a big slash in the middle, and we see a bunch of people crowding around. Oh, it's twin boys. They're so adorable, and they have your red hair. We see a woman pushing a baby carriage, and she's like, yes, they do have my hair, and the townsfolk are like, oh, we can only hope they turn out to be as wise as you do. And they say, oh, well, their father's not around, so I'm going to need help raising the babies. And then we learn their names, and we see a little baby, da-dun, Shanks and Shamrock as children. Totally adorable, complete with the red hair. No sun, moon, and star PJs, though. So, Ed, tell me your thoughts a little bit on this.
All right, so Mother has bright red hair, just like them. So we can just assume that they have the same hair color as their mother. And why would Garling be interested in her specifically? Because, like, we already know that the celestial dragons are kind of all about purity, and they're interested in keeping, their blood pure and having children with other celestial dragons, stuff like that. So it's just kind of interesting that he would go out of the celestial dragons and have children with someone else. Also, Garling is planning on having the great hunt to take place in God Valley because, I mean, we already know when they do the hunts, they kind of, like want to have like the king get killed as like a prize, like extra points and stuff like that. So they're basically committing like genocide on the entire island, So why would Garling want to like plant roots and have children with someone there if he's planning on like destroying the island? What do you think?
Yeah, I find it hard to believe why he would want to lay down roots there. The only thing I could possibly think of being God Valley, maybe there's like a splinter group of like celestial dragons or something. Somebody who retains like pure blood, or somebody who is unique and powerful enough to warrant like being the mother of his children. Because like we touched on earlier, we see that Garling is very, very ambitious. He has a plan for everything he does. So when it comes to siring or fathering children, he's going to make sure that he picks the best possible mother. And I don't know. We know that the world government are kind of evil, but I don't understand the angle for wanting to put your own children in danger and like killing potentially everybody their mother knows, as well as maybe even potentially their mother. I also think it's very interesting. I'm sorry, I just had to throw this in there real quick. Oh, and I'll let you do the honors.
Oh, the whole shamrock is a type of clover?
No, okay. So I just find it very interesting that the whole chapter is talking about Rocks could potentially be the father of children right now because he's
Oh,
grinning like
yeah.
an idiot. And then, we see these two red-haired babies. It's We don't even know if these are Garling's kids, man. We know they look alike, but what if they really are the progeny of one of Rock's D Zebek?
I mean, his name is Shamrock, so there we go. Yeah, then like that would make it interesting because like let's say like Buggy is also a son of Rocks, then Shanks and Buggy would be like actual like blood related brothers as well, which is kind of interesting to think about. I don't believe it. Like just looking at them, like they look like Garling when Garling was young. Like current Shanks and Shamrock have a lot of Garling's like features when he was younger. So I do believe they are the children of Garling, but it's still kind of fun to think about. But yeah, so Shamrock, I want to go back to the whole Shamrock as a type of clover. So like it's kind of like associated with luck in Irish culture. Also, like people in Ireland are known for having red hair. So like maybe there's like an Irish motif on this island as well. Because we haven't really seen any type of Irish anything in One Piece at all. So like maybe Oda is trying to bring another culture into the mix of One Piece or another cultural inspiration into the mix of One Piece. So yeah, that's Shamrock's name, but Shanks's name like it doesn't really fit. Like the two names Shamrock and Shanks, like they don't really like there's not really a theme between the two names. Like, I guess the theme might be SHA. Like, both their names kind of start with the same letters because a shank could be like lamb shanks, or it could be also associated with stabbing. And we know that Shanks is a swordsman. So, and also Garling is a swordsman. So maybe it's like luck, like one is his luck, like one child is his luck and one child is his like right hand weapon, his sword. So maybe that's their namesake. I'm not sure. What do you think about their names?
All right, so a couple things. I think it's very interesting that Roger named his son after his sword. I think it would be really fitting if Garling also did the same thing. Maybe he named Shanks after his sword, and Shamrock is kind of like his good luck charm. I don't know. I still love the idea that the potential of Rocks actually being the father of these children, because we know Rocks went to God Valley in order to get back something that the world government stole from him. I think it would be very interesting if the world government found out his children were on God Valley and then went ahead and tried to capture them and ransom them in some way to control Rocks. And then Rocks went in to save them, and eventually it led to his demise. What do you think?
Yeah, in terms of like if Rox was their father, I could see that totally being the case. Again, I'm not sold on the Rox being their father idea, but like just to keep playing into it, Rox and Garling are both known for swordsmen. So yeah, and also we know that Big Mom is calling out that Rox is probably going to be a father soon. So the timing does kind of add up. I do think that this might just be misdirection, bringing them both up at the same time. I don't think that they are Rox's children. I still believe that it's Shanks, but it's still kind of fun to think about, like, in the case that I'm wrong, and they are actually Rox's children, what that would signify.
The only other thing I want to note too is so we see the relations between like Gloriosa and Roger, and we know that Roger eventually he went on to have Ace with a woman who is known as Portcasty Rouge. I think it's interesting that Rouge is a type of red, so maybe there's like a subtle nod to these women, perhaps. Maybe the Kuja aren't the only special tribe of women in the One Piece world. Perhaps maybe there's another lineage of women that are like really important to the story, because we don't see a lot of female Ds in the story. We know the Kuja are very special, but I don't think we've seen any other female Ds in the story besides Port Castille Rouge. Not anything that I could think of or anyone I could think of top of mind.
Yeah, and speaking of Rouge, maybe is she the redheaded mother of Shanks and Shamrock? Like, we gotta explore that. Like, I looked at the images of Rouge because she's like really the only other prominent redheaded person in One Piece that I can think of. And her hair is kind of like, at least in the anime, it's like a little bit more like lighter red, like almost pinkish in certain like imagery. Whereas Shanks has more like darker red or more like, yeah, it's more vibrant of a red color. So, but still, maybe it was colored wrong and they actually have the same hair color. It, and she is a D. It. I wouldn't rule out that this woman that we're seeing, that's the mother of Shanks and Shamrock, is Port Gusty Rouge. I would not rule that out whatsoever.
Ooh, and so it gets even deeper. I do find it hard to believe that Figerland would have a wife, or excuse me, would take a wife who is a D, or, have children with a lady who is a D. However, I do think it would be very interesting maybe if Figerland is almost playing the long game with like a sword that's within like the highest echelons of the world government, similar to what Garp is doing, right? But just at that higher level.
Yeah.
But I still find it really hard to believe that he would put down roots and then choose to like kill everybody on the island.
Yeah, it's wild, but like he is a villain. He's definitely a bad guy. So, we can't really, I don't know exactly what his goal here is, but yeah, he's a bad guy. So yeah.
Total baddie. Can't wait to see what happens next. But this has been episode 39, chapter 1158 of the Void Sentry Podcast, Rocks versus Herald. Thanks for sailing with us. That's it for this voyage of the Void Sentry Podcast. Listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you sail for One Piece content. Catch our bite-sized theories and lore on TikTok and Instagram Reels. Until next time, whether you're seeking the poneglyphs or unraveling the history behind the will of the D, listen to the voice of all things and we'll see you on our next voyage.